Good afternoon, evening, everyone. I know you guys have been here for a while, so I won't take too long. I would like to say that I'm sure you've heard this, but I think it bears repeating. Thank you very much for being here today. This is a topic that is definitely very near and dear to my heart. And clearly, you can tell from the other speakers who have been here today that it's very near and dear to their heart, too, this idea of transforming Towson. So thank you for coming, and thank you for staying the course. What I want to talk about today is very much something that is born out of a course that I teach, this Mr. Rogers 101 course. And it really kind of, the quick backstory of it is that before I came to Towson, I taught middle school. So it's kind of a quantum leap, to say the least. So one of the things, I taught at this little private school. And so I teach at this private school, and one of the things that I didn't realize we had there was a real strong sense of community. There were all these kinds of layers of very informal groups of people who would talk all the time and would share in very informal ways. And it wasn't until I came here to Towson that I realized how much I missed that. So fast forward, I teach in the Honors College, and I have the wonderful gift of being able to occasionally design some courses. And one of the things I was really curious about, well, let me say this, whenever I try to create a course, it's always out of curiosity, because I'm not often an expert on the topics I teach, but I love to learn like a lot of you do. And so I have the luxury of being able to design courses once in a while where I can teach something that I'm learning about as the students are. Literally, I'm learning about it as the students are. And this is something that I just had a hunch about. Because one of the things that I missed so much from that little middle school was a real sense of community. And as you all know, the larger we go, the bigger we go, the harder it gets to maintain that. So in this course, Mr. Rogers 101, I give like little experiments. I'm a big believer in hands-on learning. And I think that having us learn things that we can apply, that we learn in the classroom, but we can go out and practice and take to the streets. I'm a big fan of that kind of learning, that kind of, sometimes it's service learning or interactive learning. It just gets us to apply in real time, in real ways, what we learn. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to be a part of this with me. I'm going to lean on you, and I apologize if it makes you uncomfortable. But one of the things I am learning, as hopefully the students are, is that creating community is not an easy thing. Creating community is something that takes work, because all you've got to do is, if you don't even look here on Towson's campus, all you've got to do is look at the communities where you live. I mean, I'm not going to lean on you for this one, but I'm sure if I asked you to get a show of hands, a lot of you would probably raise your hands if I asked you the question, how many of you live in places where many of your neighbors never even bother to talk to each other? I'm sure I would get a sizable number of hands. I'm maybe going out on a limb there, but I really think I would. I really do believe that here at Towson, that as I talk to my students, and I talk a lot to them when I teach this course, and now students are going out doing surveys throughout the campus to gauge the sense of community spirit and community feeling here on Towson's campus. Some of the things that they've come back with have been not surprising, but also very enlightening. So here's one of them. Students went out and they asked other students where they felt like they find a sense of community here at Towson. Clubs. They found it often at clubs. A lot of students said they find it at football games. One of the ones I left off, my apologies, Greek life. This is all well and good. It's all completely normal, as it is at most colleges and universities. But here's the difference. As you know, Towson still has a heavy population, a very large population of commuters. We have a big commuter population, and we have a growing population of people living on campus. It's very difficult to bridge that chasm for the commuters. And they can't always make it to the football games. They can't always be involved in clubs. and not always Greek life, because a lot of the students work part-time jobs. So one of the things that I've been asking students to look at is to think about ways we can bridge this chasm, if we can, because I really do believe we can. And one of the things I'm learning as I teach this course, as I do the reading and we do a lot of talking and I talk to people, is that community is something we don't have to get overwhelmed with. We do. We look to Facebook so often and join communities and get on board with social causes. That's all well and good, because we feel like taking it one person at a time is just too overwhelming. And let's be honest, we live in a community increasingly where we have less and less resilience for face-to-face interaction with strangers. There's lots of reasons there. I don't have time to get into it. You're probably too tired to hear it anyway. We have decreasing resilience for the other, for strangers. So I really do believe, and the more I learn about this, the more I'm convinced of this, community begins with micro-community. It literally begins one person at a time. It can and it does. Studies by Robert Putnam, who's kind of the seminal figure in this topic, have shown in communities around the country where people create community and recapture it, they do it literally through interrelationships. So why don't we seek out community? Well, one of the things that students are finding out more and more, and they say it themselves, we fear rejection. We fear rejection from approaching somebody that maybe, who maybe like they're sitting down and their book's dropped and they're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of coming up to somebody whose face is in their phone that they know, because they feel like, I don't want to impose on their space and their time. They fear rejection. And those are just two small examples. But as a culture, we do. We fear rejection. The other thing that a lot of students are finding out is that a lot of people feel like community is like love. There's all the time in the world, man. I'll just find it later. I can just find it some other time, when I get older, when I get a job, when I live in a community. I can just do it then. But that kind of intimacy, like love, is something that we just can't flip a switch with. This kind of switch is something that we need muscle memory with. Creating relationships is the same regardless of whether you're talking micro or macro. It's something that we have to learn, we have to do, we need that muscle memory. So one of the things that students are learning more and more as they go out and do these experiments through the course is the importance of a few things. And this is just to kind of encapsulate a few of the really important ones in terms of micro-community, this kind of one-on-one community creating. One of them is extending towards. It's extending towards somebody, whether that's physically or emotionally or just verbally. It's literally one-on-one, beyond people that we're comfortable with. It's extending towards them, literally creating the same space. The second one is listening. Now, we all know that we're all probably really good listeners, or at least we like to think that we do. But a lot of us are really big on, as I am myself, my wife would tell you this, really big on waiting for people to finish saying what they're saying so we can jump in and say what we've got to say. We miss so much when we're waiting for people to stop talking. The other thing is tolerance, empathy. It's accepting the fact that what somebody is saying is only maybe part of their truth. We live in a time of, thank God, we're finally having the racial discussion and the discourse that we desperately need. One of the things that gets in the way, though, is when we hear things that we don't want to hear. That's an opening. That's an invitation. And I think we do ourselves well to think of it that way. This idea of trying more tolerance means not that you can completely accept or understand or like what somebody else is saying, but maybe it's an invitation, if we can show some restraint, to have a discussion about the kinds of things that they're talking about that might make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's true of gender, I think true of race with what's going on, and it's true of a lot of things, socioeconomic class, but this is the kind of thing we're talking about. So I want to lean on you guys for just a few minutes to just bear with me. If you wouldn't mind standing up, please, we'll do a really quick experiment. I know this is going to make you uncomfortable, but this is what community is all about. It's about being in community and making the hard choices. So this is what I'd like you to do. Get away from the table you're at. Find somebody across the room, lock eyes with that person, run to them with open arms, or keep your arms down, whatever you're comfortable with. I know. Here's the thing. I'm going to give you one of two icebreakers. I'm not going to give you some kind of cute, charming icebreaker. We're just going to keep this simple and real, because this is the way we make micro community. So I'll give you one of two questions to ask, or you can just wing it. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you could ask somebody or tell them what you think Towson needs to be maybe a more open and friendly place. Or something, this one's a little more personal, something you wish more people knew about you. Take either one or wing it. Either tell somebody something you wish more people knew about you, or what you think it would take at Towson for it to be a more welcoming and friendly place. So please, take a few minutes when you're done. If you feel up to it, take a selfie. Find a new friend. Take a few minutes, please, go. Run, open arms, closed arms, whatever. Introduce yourself. Remember to listen. Listen carefully. Should we stop it? Feel free to do the selfie thing. doing on time? Are we okay? We all right? Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll wrap this up in about another minute. If you're ready, you can sit down. So I just want to share with you a really quick, kind of funny little story before we wrap up here. I was part of this panel discussion with Civility a couple weeks ago, and I got to talk to some folks afterwards who did this little experiment. And a gentleman came up to me and he said, I have to say that, I was really skeptical about this, of course, understandably. But he said, one thing that was really great was he said, I learned something about Donald Trump. And of course, I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump at all. And I said, okay. And he said, well, but the more we got to talk, as a result of having a conversation with this gentleman about Donald Trump, he said, I learned some aspect of Donald Trump that I don't agree with, but it was an aspect in terms of, understanding who he is as a candidate that I never would have thought of. I hadn't even read about it. And he said, so I learned something really important about Donald Trump. And he said, I never would have had a conversation like this with a person who has these views. And I thought, this is the kind of thing that is a starting place. This is this idea of micro-community, it's a starting place. Because there's, otherwise it's just too big and too overwhelming. So I want to thank you very, very much this late in the afternoon, and after hearing all the presentations, for being a part of this and for being good sports and taking part. So thank you very much.